The influence of traditional African art on modern artists working in early 20th century Paris by Tasia Williams Ortiz. In France during the early 1900s, Henri Matisse, Pablo Picasso, and their School of Paris friends blended the highly stylized treatment of the human figure in African sculptures with painting styles that derived from the post-impressionist works of Cézanne and Gauguin. The aesthetics of traditional African sculptures became a powerful influence among artists who have an avant-garde in the development of modern art. During Matisse's short career as a clerk in a law office, he secretly took painting classes, which eventually made him devote himself to the pursuit of art full time. He went to Paris to study at the Academic Julian and later transferred to the École des Beaux-Arts, where he trained in the traditional academic style under the influence of painters such as the Impressionists and Cézanne. Matisse painted the young sailor in the year of 1906 at the height of his involvement with the Falls. In this picture sits an 18-year-old fisherman by the name of German Augustine Bartholomew Montagues from a small Mediterranean village near the Spanish border. His rather theatrical looks and the work's bold palette combine to make this painting one of Matisse's most decorative portraits in the Falk's manner. Henri Matisse painted the portrait of Marie Giovanni Landsberg in the year of 1914 and is currently being held at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The history of this painting began with a portrait drawing of Giovanni Landsberg commissioned by her family in Paris of the spring of 1914. Matisse eventually gained permission to make an oil painting of Giovanni with the company of her brother. Like his father Henry, Pierre Matisse acquired works of African art that related to the modern interest and abstraction of the human form. The still and active attitudes of the standing male figure happens to be a container for ancestral artifacts, and the interior of a tall torso is accessible through the back removable rectangular shaped panel. In Fang society, figurative sculptures produced for the ancestor cult were designed to complement reliquary containers. This sculptural creation distills the representation of a larger-than-life ancestral presence to a head with a penetrating gaze. It is the embodiment of Fang sculpture and one of the greatest classics of African art. Picasso's African period lasted from 1907 to 1909, and in this period followed his Blue Period and Rose Period, also known as the Negro Period and Black Period. During this time, Pablo painted in a style that was strongly influenced by African sculptures, but particularly African masks. Picasso's Blue Period lasted from 1901 to 1902, in which consisted of dull paintings in shades of blue and blue-green, and only occasionally warms by other colors. His painting, Woman with Crossed Arms, was painted in 1902 during the Blue Period. However, the subject of the painting is unknown, but was said that she may have been an inmate at Saint Lazare Hospital prison in Paris. The Rose period lasted from 1904 to 1906 and is characterized by a more cheery kind of style with orange and pink colors that feature many circus people such as acrobats and harlequins. The harlequin is a comedic character usually dressed in checkered patterned clothing, which became a personal symbol for Picasso. This painting was created in 1907 by the Spanish artist Pablo Picasso to represent the Liberian sculptures he had gotten from an acquaintance who had stolen them from the Louvre Museum in Paris during the start of his Black period, and it also happens to be his influence to African art. Modern artists were drawn to African sculptures because of its sophisticated approach to the abstraction of the human figure, such as the sculpted head from a Fang reliquary assembled and a reliquary by the MB artist. The origin of the Fang work includes the collection of London-based sculptor Jacob Epstein, who was a longtime friend of Picasso Matisse, while the MB reliquary is now owned by Pierre Matisse. Adam was carved by Jacob Epstein from a single block of alabaster, which is a type of soft rock, between 1938 and 1939. It was bought by a showman and toured around fairgrounds as a freak object before being sold to Sotheby's. It was then purchased by the 7th Earl of Harwood from the owners of the work display at Blackpool in February 1961. The Afro-Cuban artist Wilfredo Lam was closely involved with the Surrealists in Paris, and whose dealer happened to be Pierre Matisse, painted hybrid figures blending in bizarre surrealist sensibility with African figural styles and also references to spirituality. The painting Goddess with Foliage was created in 1942 by the artist Wilfredo Lam. The elements of African, Cubist, and Surrealist art seem to be blended in this large hybrid figure, while the woman's ears are pointed, a horse's snout, buttock, fruit-shaped breasts, and expressive hands combine human, vegetal, and animal-like elements. The influence of traditional African aesthetics and processes is so profoundly embedded in the artistic practice that it is only rarely evoked as such. The increasingly globalization of the art world now includes African artists such as Malian photographer Seydou Keita and Ghana-born sculptor El Anasui. Seydou Keita opened his legendary art studio in Bamako, the capital city of Mali, in 1948 near the railway station and post office, and it happened to be the most fashionable place to be seen and photographed. Keita operated his studio until 1962, and after Mali's independence, he was asked to be a government photographer, and he later retired in the mid 1970s. In the 20th century, photography became a medium of expression that African artists began to draw upon as a reflection of the world around them. This untitled portrait of an unidentified woman was taken in 1956 and printed in 1997, and it displays his signature pictorial style that made Keita the first important Malian photographer in his generation. Elana Sui is an international acclaimed artist who transforms simple materials into complex collections that creates a distinctive visual impact. He uses resources typically discarded, such as liquor bottle caps and cassava graters, to create a sculpture that defines categorization. This work, entitled Between Earth and Heaven by an African master of international renown, is a highly original creation that constitutes a response to a classical established form of expression. The recent series of works that Between Earth and Heaven relates to are the celebrated West African traditions of strip woven textiles, namely that of kente developed by Akan and Iwi weavers in Anasui's native Ghana.